Okay. Once again, for colleagues just coming into the room, a very, very warm welcome to this first Human Rights Funders Network Learning Lab. We host 4 learning labs this week. This today is the first lab and looking at early warning systems. So as you're coming into the room, please do share a greeting in the Zoom chat, an introduction, and just to mention some of the ways in which we'll be engaging today. So there is, in fact, not translation for today's session, but captioning is available. So you'll see the caption button on the right of your navigation bar at the bottom. Thank you for remaining muted during our presentations. And the session is being recorded. So we are being recorded today. So thank you, folks. I'm going to introduce Kalia Miller, the Executive Director at HRFN, who I'm sure many of you know very well. Kalia, over to you to tell us a little bit about better preparedness, funding resilience.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Adi. And it is such a joy to see all of you coming into the Zoom room. I feel like many of you have been part of these conversations, and I know for others that this will be new. I see many familiar faces, and so some of you know this, and some of this is an introduction. But for today, what we want to share is that we've been on a journey looking at how funders can respond in crisis and also in closed civic space. We started this at HRFN many years ago in partnership with Fix and with Ariadne. But after the fall of the government in Afghanistan and the removal of US troops, what we saw as the Taliban was rising, that funders were trying to gather and coordinate. This was not the first time, but we received many calls immediately asking what we could do. We've seen the same in Haiti. We've seen the same in Myanmar. We have seen the same in Ukraine. We're seeing the same right now in Palestine. We know that there are many moments where funders want to coordinate and want to respond to both acute crises and the very long-term closing and shuttering of human rights space that we see before a crisis occurs. With this work that we have kicked off this year, we are aiming, as the goal says, to ensure that human rights defenders, social justice movements, and civil society have access to the resources that they need when and how they need them. This journey of better preparedness, funding resilience, has to happen at some point, and we believe the time is absolutely now. As I mentioned, there has been an increase in coordination, a very marked shift in the last few years, particularly with some of those examples that I've given. We also recognize that there are invisible and often underfunded spaces that are not connected. We believe that right now there is an absolutely urgent need for new approaches to funding civil society and social movements. We recognize that some of the tools to do this are in place, but often they stay within single institutions, that coordination happens based on personal relationships, that using many of the different forms of insight, foresight, and early warning that help us see what is coming are not yet integrated into the way that funders are operating, either as individual institutions or in a collaborative way. So what is this better preparedness, funding resilience? What this is a year-long journey in which a core group of funders, currently about 20 foundations, although we welcome others to join at this stage. There won't be much longer, so if you want to join, sign up soon. To start as a core group and really build out the tools that we as individuals and institutions need to be able to come together in moments of acute crisis and in closing civic space. We recognize that there is a possibility to shape it in several different ways and that the needs might change, but ultimately, what we're trying to do is bring together peace and security and human rights funders with civil society to co-design blueprints for this kind of coordination and long-term collaborative work, and to build the trust and political will to deliver on it. We know that we can have all of the best intentions, but if we do not have the relationships of trust that enable people to say, I will never get my board to support this, but I know you can do it. Or I can get money into this setting when you can't, that foundation, if we do not have that, we will not be able to truly meet the needs in the most restricted spaces. So this is both a community that we are creating and a set of tools designed by and with those of you who are part of this process. You know best what you need within your own institutions to build both the leadership and the technical capacity to deliver in these settings. And we know as a human rights funders network that we can also provide some of the connectivity. We understand that people may fund in different ways and in different places, but that if we can unite in these moments and over time as an ecosystem, that we hope will be able to significantly shift how philanthropy uses the unique, and it is unique, entry point that we have into various kinds of social justice and human rights events. We recognize that the time is now, that this group is here. You are here today as part of the open sessions. So we have the closed co-design labs for the core funders who choose to join. And then we have this series. Today, you can see we've started, we're on number 2. So first, we've been involved in a discovery phase for the last several months, looking at research, looking at the challenges and opportunities, building the momentum with many of you. Today, this week, we're exploring 4 different topics as a community, and we welcome your insight, and we're very lucky to have the speakers we have today sharing their own experiences. Then over the next several months, we'll be in the co-design. And as I said, and you can see in the chat, if you want to participate, there are several ways you can. And then in the end of April and through June, we'll be testing out and prototyping. Our goal here is both to build systems that will be useful for those of you in the philanthropic sector, that are responsive to those in human rights, social justice movements, and may be used to build long-term leadership buy-in, because we know that is a key to successfully implementing the kind of work, to be prepared, to use foresight and early warning, and to be able to respond to the most pressing needs in a strategic and shared collaborative way. So with that, I hand it over to Adi and to our incredible speakers for today's conversation.
Kalia, thank you so much. Colleagues, today we're looking at early warning systems. And why? Because we want to understand what early warning systems in other sectors could offer philanthropy, funding, civil society facing acute human rights crisis, and longer-term civic space trends. So there are 2 lines of inquiry for today. The first is, what are the relevant early warning systems that are out there that are being used in human rights, in humanitarian, in peace-building sectors, and both inside and outside philanthropy? And then the second is, how can these early warning systems help improve our preparedness and coordination, both internally in our institutions and across the field between funders? Perhaps a good place to start, a working definition of early warning systems. This is from the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, an integrated system of hazard monitoring, forecasting and prediction, crisis risk assessment, communications and preparedness activities that together enable stakeholders to take timely action, reducing risks and taking action in advance of hazardous events. It's a little different dependent on the sector, but a useful working definition. Today, we're going to hear from 4 speakers who are going to describe their experiences of building and managing and using different types of early warning systems. And these fall into broadly 3 categories. The first is community-powered networks, often using technology to be able to gather the information from community networks and then work out how to analyze and synthesize that. The second, using regular research and analysis by experts with a great deal of knowledge in a particular local setting or a country setting, and running an expert analysis of that. And the third is a quantitative forecasting model using machine learning that produces trends on forecasting that then can be analyzed and presented through human analysis. So that's the setting for our conversation today. And we are absolutely delighted to have with us Sofia Marcia, the Co-Executive Director of Grantmaking and Programs at the Urgent Action Fund, Latin America and the Caribbean, Ryan Schlief, the Executive Director of the International Accountability Project, Isabelle Arradon, the Director of Research at the International Crisis Group, and Eric Wibbles, the Presidential Penn Compact Professor of Political Science at the University of Pennsylvania. Colleagues, we're going to dive in. Each of our speakers has a very generous 7 minutes. At the end of that, we're going to pull out some of the key questions because we're a big group today, so we won't get to hear from everyone, but we'll pick out some of the trending questions. To help us do that, please, as you're hearing our speakers, do add your comment, reflection, or question and who that question is to in the Zoom chat. Okay, let's get underway. Sofia, I'm going to come to you and with thanks.
Thank you very much, AD. And thank you everyone for being here, hearing us. I'm very honoring to share with you some of the lessons learned from the Urgent Action Fund in Latin America and the Caribbean, and also for the consortium of the Urgent Action Funds. And well, today I'm going to share you some of the lessons learned and some of the work that we do thinking on these early warning systems and how does it work for us in context of crisis, especially in Latin America that we are facing a lot of crises. And I'm going to center in the election model because for the work that we do, that we've been doing in Latin America, this is what is clear for us in context of crisis. In election models, it's really important to being able to have a context of what is going to happen later. So that's what I'm going to center in. And then we said we don't have a big name, you know, to name what we do, the work, the early warning system. But for us, it's an early warning system based on the power of the community, based on the power of the voices of the feminist, trans, and non-binary movements in the region, and based especially in the collective care, based in the trust, especially, and also based on centering the care on these relations that we do with the allies in the region, that those relationships are very important for the work that we do in the region, and especially to being able to accompany this context and to have a warning system, an early warning system. So I want to share that and to start sharing with you that first, how do we do this? For us, it's really important, as I said before, the alliance, to have a network based on the listening, and to have these spaces with the allies in the countries, because we don't have offices in every country, but what we do is to have this big network and maintain this network of allies in the country. So we have spaces to hear, so we can hear each other before the election. For example, we are part of some of these crisis groups that are organizations in the local, in these countries, other human rights organizations, so we can be like touching the context together and being listening what is going on, what is going to happen. For us, especially in the key of protection, security, and collective care. So we know months before that the context is going to be more difficult for the women, trans, and non-binary activists that are at the forefront of this, of defending the rights. So we go and call from some of these alliances and have spaces to analyze together the context. For us, it's important to hear from the voice of the allies, the people who are there in the context, how are they seeing and feeling the context? What are the risks that they are feeling and also seeing? So for us, it's really important to ask them, what are the needs in that moment? What they think is going to be like the best way to be there with them, and to not put more pressures, because in that moment it's important to maintain the calm. So we always say, in context of crisis, it's important to maintain calm. It's important to be like to provide also calm to the organization, because it's going to be difficult. We also know. So also it's important for us, the communications, the strategic communication that we do. And we said strategic because it's not only communicate, it's communicate with care. It's communicate asking them what are the risks being seen together, right? Taking care of the information we put on the outside, because there's, in that context, there's a lot of fake news. There's a lot of, there can be a lot of persecution to the people who are at the forefront. So it's important to see with them which are the best way to protect the security and to protect the way to, so we can accompany and provide support in that moment. So we remind them, we use this kind of information that you can see here on screen. We build them together with the organizations, and we it's a reminder that this is the action that we support. It's a little reminder. So we share this information through Signal groups, for example, or with allies that are like very close to us, but we care to do not put this information in a public space, because it can be very unsecure for the activists and defenders. So this is one of the ways that we use to share the information and to remind them that it's important to maintain calm, and here we are to support them, to do not put more press in that moment. So also for us, it's important to center the early warning system not in the way that it's to complement, to make the complementation of other actions that are there happening. We know that there's another organization doing also the work to accompany context of crisis. So in that moment, it's important to find alliance, others organizations that maybe are around also doing the work, and do not duplicate the work together with other organizations. So those are some of the experience and some of the lesson learning from us. I have finished my 7 minutes. There's more to share, but I'm going to let you hear with this some thoughts. Thank you.
Sofia, thank you so much. Thank you for opening this up for us beautifully. I'm going to come next to Ryan, and Ryan, I'll be driving, so next slide as you need.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. First of all, IAP, the International Accountability Project, is part of a global movement for development justice, and we also support community-led development. And I'm going to share 2 different examples of early warning systems that we use. Before we started using early warning systems, we really did our best around activism and advocacy to support communities affected by development they didn't want. We often heard from them directly or from our partners after the abuse has already started. And so a few years ago is our intention to try to move further in front of this and try to intervene before these abuses actually happen. Next slide. There are 5 different ways that I feel IAP has benefited from doing early warning systems work. First of all, preventative. We've been able to interrupt the systems and the actors that are likely causing the abuses. We've been able to be more predictive by looking at the trends. We can anticipate the next type of abuses, where they may happen and to whom. It also increases our preparedness. Of course, more time means better campaigning and more coalescing around objectives in the campaign. We also, I feel, have increased leverage because we're reaching the actors early on in the process. And that can, increase our likelihood of having success. And finally, for us, like, early warning systems have allowed us to keep a stronger focus to support communities on the likely sources of abuse, so we don't lose sight of the likely perpetrators of abuse. So just to give you a little introduction, next slide, into the realities of development and development justice in which we work, that frames our work on early warning. We have generations of documentation that development and development projects can create zones of human environmental rights abuses. We know large-scale hydropower projects, highways, other infrastructure projects can take land from communities, can change or end their livelihoods. So we know this already. Also, in the space of development, the projects and the financing are largely designed and implemented without local people involved. And it's their experience and expertise that IAP tries to leverage in these campaigns. And the reality, of course, just like all of us on this call, we want to know about what's happening in our communities, how it's going to affect us. We want to contribute to that conversation, if not lead on it. In this advocacy work, it does require a lot of teamwork at local, national, international levels, because it is a development project. And we have several decision makers that are all quite different: government, companies, and investors at each and every level. So for my first example, in an effort to be early, IAP created its own software to collect and standardize financial information being proposed from public banks. This includes information about governments, companies, and investors involved. So on this slide, I will give you a basic 101 on how much of development works. So starting at the top with decision makers, a lot of development funding and projects come from government, companies, and investors. They may choose to access public banks like the World Bank, African Development Bank, and others for grants and loans. And when they do, public banks have obligations to share this information publicly. They have to share their proposed projects and details of these projects. Just last year, the 16 public banks that IAP tracks, there were 3,100 projects. It was about 260 billion US dollars, which is about $750 million per day that we're tracking. When I say projects, this can be an infrastructure project, so a physical project, like a highway or a hydropower project. It can also be financing for policy changes, for example, privatization of healthcare or education. It can also be financing national and private banks to do expanded lending. So this information that comes in at the proposal stage, so before all the financial contracts are signed, goes to the early warning system, like through our software, and our team reviews and publishes an accessible summary, and we attempt to reach those nearest to any impacts before the project is approved, either directly or through national and local partners. Even if there's not an intervention pre-approval, at least we have this information before the project starts, before abuses are likely to happen. What happens in this stage is information sharing, but also training. We can support the mobilization of communities. We can do different forms of advocacy that then go back to governments, companies, and investors. Again, this often happens at 3 different levels. It can be with local and national government. It can be local and national, international companies and investors. Often communities, they may not be aware of all the different stakeholders with this project. And by being early, there's more time for us to prepare and either mobilize or strengthen these local campaigns. And we do this primarily in 4 ways. Next slide. So because we're early, we do 4 different types of advocacy. The first one is by supporting the community to survey itself and to understand how it has or has not engaged in the project, what the impacts have been or could be, and additionally, what do they actually want for their community, if development or not any development. And the next one is we may actually develop with them a report or engagement protocols so they can just determine how they engage with people from outside of their communities. And this really forms the platform for their campaign. We do direct advocacy. This is a letter from a community in Malawi that they wrote to the World Bank and other banks about a project affecting them. And we would do letters or host meetings or have different types of direct engagement on that project. Also, in the last picture, we see an independent mediator working in between a company and the community in Malawi that was affected by a project. And we could accompany them in person, whether it's governments, companies, or investors. With all of this information, by being early and tracking the sources, allows IAP and the early warning system to share trends analyses to understand who is financing what, where. These trends analyses support policy work, but also for our partners to understand better the context in their own country. Who is funding what, where, and to what frequency. In each analysis, the individual project descriptions are available publicly, along with the original documentation. And to be even more preventative and anticipatory of abuses, on the last slide, the other example I wanted to share is that IAP hosts a co-created global initiative with 7 communities in 7 countries. And these communities are trained and co-learn from each other how to research and create their own community-led development plans and engagement protocols. The research and recommendations from these communities will be published in a report, which will then be used to advocate towards the decision makers to start with communities first. We'll also be publishing a training guide to popularize communities preparing and deciding their own development. Last slide is just a link of resources of how to get in touch and learn more. Thanks so much.
Ryan, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, hopefully a great balance that we're bringing to you today to show these different facets of the different types of systems. And we're going to come next to Isabelle Arradon at International Crisis Group to hear about the Crisis Watch early warning system tool and other practices. Isabelle, over to you.
Thank you very much, Adi. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. So yes, my name is Isabelle Arradon. I work for International Crisis Group based in Brussels. And for those who may know the organization, we work on conflict prevention and conflict resolution, trying to help with the prevention and mitigation of violent conflicts across the world. The organization was set up in 1995, and I think it's very aligned with what we're discussing today, because the whole idea of its creation in 1995 was to help prevent mass atrocities and the resurgence of violent conflict. You know, it was in the mid 90s when, of course, we had the Bosnia War, the Rwanda genocide, and other big crises. Unfortunately, 25 years on, and I think that's why we're having the discussion today. We're still seeing violent conflict very much alive. I mean, the images on all our television today are, of course, about Israel-Palestine, and prior to that, the Ukraine war, and in September there was about Nagorno-Karabakh. So there's still, of course, a lot to do, and I think part of the reason today is because we're all acutely aware that conflict fatalities have have never been higher since the start of the 21st century. And actually, we're looking at among the highest numbers since the Second World War. So there is some urgency in some of the discussion today. I'm leading on the early warning work at Crisis Group, and I've been doing so since 2014. So I have a little bit, I guess, of background into our work, and we have a number of instruments that we could be discussing today. Some are more short-term, some are more long-term. Here, I'll discuss with you two tools that we work a lot with. Next slide, Adi. So one is Crisis Watch, and I hope some of you may have used it in the past. It's been actually in place for 20 years. It started in September 2003. We're celebrating the 20th anniversary, and we think it's important that there is this particular long record from the Crisis Watch. You can actually check the database since it started. You can see on this map in front of you what we track, basically. In dark orange, these are the countries or conflict situations that we track every month. And in light orange, the 50 or 60 situations that we monitor. So in other words, we do, through our network of analysts across the world, provide information on these 70 situations every month that are in dark orange. So you can see, for example, Mexico, or you can see Somalia, India, Pakistan, etc. So you've got a number of situations. And what we focus on, it's about the political and the security developments. So try to track month to month how the overall security and political situation in these places has improved, deteriorated, or remained the same. And that's why you've got the colors here. What you see in green, that's Venezuela and Colombia, and we assessed basically between October, we assessed for the month of October an improvement in these two situations. In relation to the red color on your screen, that's about deterioration. And it was very sad to see so many deteriorations in the month of October. We had 12 in total, which I think tells you about the state of the world today. Unfortunately, I see a lot of increased volatility, a lot of movement. And we had a total of 10 conflict risk alerts, including 5 on the Middle East. Again, you can see in our interactive map on the website more clearly all these different elements. Next slide. So you can see here some of what I was just discussing, the trends for October and the conflict risk alerts for November. Our methodology is, of course, a little different than that of the previous speakers. What we do is, in essence, qualitative expert judgment in relation to the situations that we assess. As I said, we have a network of analysts in different places in the world who've been working on these situations for a very long time, who speak the local languages, who have a strong network, and I'm sure in some cases are in touch with the very organizations Ryan and Sofia work with, or I would hope so. And so this sort of information, they share that with us in Brussels, and we produce the sort of summaries on the situations that you can see here in front of you. I decided to highlight the one on Israel-Palestine. And there you can see in the first line in bold a summary of our assessment. And then through these 3 paragraphs, the sort of trends that we track in each of the conflict situations. So in this case, we were tracking the situation in Gaza, second, the situation in the West Bank, and third, the particular tensions at the border between Israel and Hezbollah. And so for those who are interested in the methodology, what's quite interesting is that you could basically see some of these top arrows when you get a message about the crisis watch coming in, and then think maybe other situations are quiet. But in reality, when you start to go deeper in these particular entries, what you will get is sometimes mini deteriorations or mini improvements. And for that, you need to go deeper and see the first line in this paragraph, the first line in italics, that basically tell you as a summary what mini trends you can see in that particular context. Next slide. So I told you about the crisis watch, which again is something that we've been working on for quite a long time. It's quite well known, and I'm very pleased that we managed to introduce a new tool just recently. I mean, we have been working on it for the past year. It's called On the Horizon, and it's basically trying to take a longer view as regards to some of the trends, because indeed you need a combination of various tools to do good early warning. And this one is about particular risks in the next 3 to 6 months. In this case, we were highlighting Ethiopia, DRC, Somaliland, and Bangladesh. Next slide. And basically what it is about is we try to think through the sort of likely behavior of conflict actors in this setting. We try to highlight the key dates, which could be flashpoints, but also the key locations. As regards DRC, we all know there are some very contentious elections happening very soon. They're scheduled on the 20th of December. And the potential of violence in the lead up to the election and afterwards is very high. And what's interesting is also to look at On the Horizon in combination with Crisis Watch. For example, we've been flagging the issue of the M23 armed group renewing its attacks in the east. And then you see that in the last Crisis Watch, we had a deterioration for the month of October, precisely because M23 is starting its attacks. So, so that's quite complementary. Next slide. Well, Adi asked me to share with you some of the results from our Crisis Watch survey back in 2021. We had a big survey asking our subscribers at the time what they thought of Crisis Watch, etc. And just to share the information so that you get a bit of an idea. Out of the replies, we got 30% were from NGOs, about 20% from university, 15% government, 13% private sector, about 10% intergovernmental organization, 4% journalist, and 1% foundation. So clearly there was quite a mix. And they were using Crisis Watch for research, 50%, and about 30% to formulate policy or programming. So what next to support this work? Just a few thoughts, because I'm mindful of time. Well, clearly you all work in the field of foundation. And so I'm sure you know this statistic already very well. But the peace and security funding landscape is very underfunded. I understand less than 1% of total philanthropic funding is being directed globally towards this cause. So I thought that was quite interesting, because in comparison, there is still high global military expenditure today. It's staggering $2 trillion in 2020. So a little bit of a mismatch here, if I may say. It seems to me that the cost of peace would be cheaper in human and economic terms. The third element that is of course quite interesting, and some of you touched on it, is in order to do effective protection of human rights, it's difficult at the time of war, but so the sort of tracking we see, there is a lot of underlying signs that could lead to potential conflict a lot earlier. So governments tend to spend a lot once the violent conflict is already happening, but one could see a lot beforehand. And I think in the introductory remarks, we heard a lot about these situations like Afghanistan. I mean, another one that comes to mind is Ethiopia. So the crisis which we were seeing, the steady deterioration, the rising tensions between Prime Minister Abiy and the Tigrayan leaders back in 2020, 6 months before the violent conflict erupted. So clearly something there. So what's the challenge? In my view, it's about bridging the gap between early warning systems information and early action prioritization from relevant actors, including coordinations for policy programming by NGOs, funders, institutions. And I thought that was very spot on to have this particular discussion today, because this is it. It's like how to improve the coordination. I mean, internally, Adi asked me to give some thoughts, but I think that would require a longer conversation. Questions around the sort of internal mechanisms that are in place within particular institution to act on the early warning information. Questions indeed about buying from the leadership, coordination with peers, what sort of flexible models are in place, because time is of the essence, breaking silos between models, understanding the importance of prioritization. I'll leave it here. Thank you very much.
Isabelle, thank you very much. And yes, thank you for also the reflection on what has to happen internally in organizations to make effective use of the kind of tools that our colleagues are sharing today. We're going to come to our final speaker today, Eric Wibbles. And Eric, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Clay and Eddie, for having us. Just give me 1 second here to get my full screen up here. So I want to thank you all for attending. I want to just give a wee tad of background here. And the tad of background is when we started this 5 years ago, we were amidst a world where democracy was eroding and human rights abuses were rampant. And as we looked at the policy world and engaged with civil society partners around the world, what we saw was a lot of responsiveness, but not a lot of capacity to sort of forecast. And sort of the aspiration was to maybe get in front of responses to the erosion of democracy and the corresponding human rights abuses. The second part is that, while this is a project that's housed at an academic institution, this is a project that started with USAID and a bunch of international and local NGOs working on civil society in lots of different places. And so we're used to engaging with this kind of community, and our aspiration is really to be helpful. So I'm going to try to go very fast and speak slowly. And I know that those two things are in tension, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, the question is, how can we, using big data and machine learning, contribute to the defense of human rights? And I think there are two quick answers. One is with regards to awareness. So an awful lot of the systematic data that we have on different elements of civic space and human rights abuses tend to be slow moving. And what we aspire to do is to accelerate the provision of data to make it essentially daily, weekly, monthly. And the second is the aspiration of improving planning, i.e. to be able to forecast the kinds of events that are associated with human rights abuses, and to put that out into the world in a civic space early warning system in a way that folks on the ground can use. The way that we do this very, very quickly is through the consumption of news. And there are a couple of things I want to emphasize here. One is that this is a ton of data. We're talking about 100 million rows of data. The second is that this is data that is overwhelmingly coming from news in the countries that we are all interested in. Most of the big data projects out there are using other aggregators. Those aggregators are not doing a good job of getting news from Guatemala or news from Benin or news from Sierra Leone. And we've really worked very hard to do that. And so what this is doing is generating high quality data for a pretty large number of countries for every month from 2012 until last month. We put all of this together and we run forecasting models. And the reason that I have the control of the screen share is because I wanted to show you this live. This is our civic space early warning system as it appears on the website right now. You'll see different kinds of countries here. There are some countries in dark gray. These are countries where USAID, our initial funder, has some political sensitivities. In order to get access to these, it's very, very easy. Just let us know and we will give you all of the data and all the analysis that we have. You can see yellow countries here. These are countries where we aren't forecasting anything with any particular accuracy, and therefore we're not reporting anything out. Countries in green are countries where we're not forecasting anything particularly large to be coming. The red ones, such as Turkey, for instance, you can click on this and you get a sense of what it is that we're forecasting here. So a very large increase in defamation cases over the next 6 to 8 months. And you can click on a little report here that will tell you more. You can look at Ghana. This is an interesting one because we're going to update Ghana on the website tomorrow. And you'll see that the forecast here of non-lethal violence that we made in June has in fact manifest. You can look at a case like Sierra Leone and see that when we last updated the forecast in July, we were forecasting a large increase in civic activism, and that in fact has taken place. So when you click on the reports, you get something that looks like, give me just 1 second here. You get something that looks like this. It's a summary of what has happened since we last updated the country. You get a report on how we actually did. So I think quite unique in the world of early warning systems. We review what we said in our last report and whether or not the thing that we forecast actually happened. And then we review what we're forecasting for the future. Okay, just to give you a sense of what is in the data. So I think we are the only game in town when one looks at a lot of these different dimensions of civic space here. So in this particular case, we're looking at data for Uganda over the course of the entire time series, and we're looking at arrests, censorship, and election irregularities in terms of systematic data on many of the kinds of things that you see down here. I think we're the only ones that are really doing this. And you know what you see is that in the Ugandan case, for instance, we see that election irregularities tend to spike right at the moments when we have elections. That's not too surprising. We also, interestingly, see censorship spike in these moments as well. You can see there's a small spike here in censorship and in election irregularities in Uganda. This is very recent, and this is something that if we had time, I would tell you more about. We're in the process of upgrading the data dashboards to look something like this. So over the course of the next week, you're likely to see something that looks like this, a little bit different than what's on the website right now. Just to give you a sense of what this data, what is behind this data. So here I'm going to show you the data for arrests in Uganda over the course of a couple of years. The arrows here are pointing to moments of particular spikes in arrests. In the data, you can see that this is all data that is coming from actual Ugandan sources. And these are the kinds of stories that are driving the spikes in the data. So we spent a lot of time over a lot of years making sure that these spikes are in fact reflective of things that are actually happening in Uganda. To forecasting, the thing that you really want to know about, here's what it looks like. So in this case, we're forecasting civic activism in Angola. This is a forecast that we did back in December of 2022, so about a year ago. The interesting thing is that if I showed you this whole time series, this is a forecast of the largest spike in civic activism over the entire history of our data in Angola. In this case, what we can actually do is we can then see what happened in the world. And so this is, I think, one of the really nice transparent features of what we're doing. And you can see that the spike came a little bit earlier than we expected. But I think if you would have got this news in December or November of 2022, this could have helped inform strategic decision making. And so that's really our aspiration here, is to be transparent in what we're doing, tell people when we have a reasonable amount of confidence, and hopefully this becomes another sort of tool in the planning toolbox. This is the kind of stories that were sitting behind that particular spike. I don't have time to go through this, but the models behind this are really powerful. Just to give you a sense that we're not just talking about an increase in civic activism in Angola. This is just to give you a sense of, in recent months, these are things that we have forecast that have actually taken place. You can just see that this is a wide range of countries, and this is a wide range of different kinds of civic events that we are forecasting. These are current applications. So we've worked with large international civil society organizations to try to sort of have some impact on how funds are directed. We think that there's a lot of promise in this. We're currently distributing this via our website, which is getting more and more traffic, and we update every month as we update the forecasts. And I just want to emphasize how flexible the research infrastructure is. We have an enormous corpus and a lot of capacity to do different kinds of things with this. So Addie, I'll say thanks again, and I hope I am okay on time.
Eric, thank you very much. In fact, all our speakers, a huge round of applause, please, if we could open our mics or send congratulatory thanks as we wrap from our speakers. Thank you very much, everyone. We have an incredible 6 minutes, and so colleagues have been trawling through the Zoom chat, and I wonder if actually we might kick off with a couple of questions combined, perhaps to everyone. How are these early warning systems most effectively used? So in some cases it's advocacy, in other cases it's other things entirely. But in your experiences, how is this helping in people taking action? Specific things that maybe Crisis Watch have seen happen in the wider world, people using those. So I'll open that up if anyone would like to take that first question. And feel free to put your hand up if you'd like. Go for it. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, because this project started in conjunction with international civil society organizations and local NGOs and sort of the DC policy world, I think it's been most effective when we have a willing partner on the other side. And then we do, I think the folks that can best use this are actually the people on the ground. So one of the things that I wasn't able to talk about is that we really focus on interpretable models. And that interpretation is best done in the hands of the folks who are experiencing the situation. And so we oftentimes will engage in conversations with how to interpret what we're doing, how to work with the data. And oftentimes the insights then come most significantly from the folks on the ground. So it's sort of having a local actor or a local policy actor who is interested in using the tool is really crucial, because then we're happy to engage with them and sort of explain how it all works. And then they're the ones that are teaching us.
Thanks. That's answering a couple of questions that have come up directly here about how, what's the human touch in terms of the analysis of what you're getting in terms of trending topics. Who should I come to next?
Well, very briefly, because of the survey, it's very complex. And I think, as I was saying, lots of people use it for different purposes. But in our case, the way we use the information is really to try to target those conflict actors and help mitigate or prevent violent conflict from happening in the first place. So we have a lot of meetings with policymakers in different places and raising the issues. In my case, I'm based in Brussels. I meet the I meet EU officials on a regular basis, and I raise on the back of Crisis Watch particular situations that we are concerned on, and we have other systems like that. Equally, I know various early warning systems that use quantitative data include Crisis Watch in their systems, including the UN Secretary General's Office and many others. So there are lots of different options. Thank you.
Isabelle, thank you. Coming to Ryan and then to Sofia.
Yeah, I mentioned in the presentation, but just to highlight again, within development, the communities are often not involved at all. So their insights, their experience, their research, what they want from development is incredibly valuable. And it's also a very positive counter argument to the investors and governments, the banks that are part of these projects, because the information that we receive often claims to be very supported. The project's very supported by the community, but that's often not the case. And so it does begin to break apart that narrative. I included 2 examples in the chat, one from Brazil and one from a global project that we're doing, the Global Advocacy Team, the one that is helping communities prepare in advance for these threats.
Ryan, thank you so much. Sophia, coming to you.
Thank you. Yes, in our case, our early warning system allow us to be close to the organizations and clarify with them what is important in that moment to help and support, and also to provide the support in short time. Because in that context, in crisis, it's important to have the information. As I said, there's a lot of information going around, so it's important to upload the information in that moment with them. So that also allows the organization in that context, for example, what is going on right now in Guatemala that happened in the last month. So we can clarify with them, what about information? What is the truly information right now? And to upload with other networks around us, and yeah. Thank you.
Sophia, Ryan, Eric, Isabelle, thank you all very much indeed. Kilia, I think you're going to lead us into summary and out.
Sure. In our last 30 seconds, I just want to first thank our incredible speakers. And what I'm sitting with today is that these resources exist, the work is happening, and the challenge goes back to something that Isabelle said, 1% of foundations are using the tools. We as a field have an opportunity to learn from all of you. And what you said that's really sitting with me and I want us to hold at the center is that communities, listening to communities and having networks of people who are living, breathing, and answering the call in these contexts is the core of what you're doing. And that it is our job as foundations, as organizations, to take that message and amplify it for the right audience. I hope we will all rely on the links you have shared. We will be sending out the resources after this and contact information. This is just a taste, and we have 3 more sessions this week in our Learning Lab series. You can see them on our website. Today was early warnings. Tomorrow is a closed session on legal and banking solutions. We'll be talking about decolonizing local and localizing grant making, and we will be talking about AI and human rights on Thursday. Thank you again for being here, and please enjoy your day, and please reach out if you would like to be a part of the next steps of the Better Preparedness Funding Resilience process. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.